One of the most misunderstood functions of the human body today is our glandular or endocrine system. Glands secrete hormones that trigger reproduction. Fertility and procreation had high value in Egyptian ideology.
The ancients were very much in tune with how the energy systems in the body, or the chakras, as the East Indians would talk about them, were connected to the glands.
Ancient teachings speak of 7 energy centers in the body called chakras. Parallels occur between the concepts of chakras, or energy centers in the body, and our glands. It appears they are 2 ways of describing the same thing, through spirituality and through science. Ancient Egyptians had a holistic understanding of the significance of the glands and their central role in reproduction and in consciousness. If we can decode the symbols, we see that the sacredness of procreation is readily visible in ancient Egyptian art.
When you see a boy or a man, you see a kind of a bottle on his head. That is not a bottle or not a white crown symbolizing Upper Egypt, as my colleagues and the scholars say. No, this is a gland in the human body known as the thymus, located behind the lungs.
The thymus is most active when a baby is in utero. It continues to be active until puberty. Then it begins to shrink and is atrophied when we stop being fertile. It was a critical activator of consciousness.
The red crown is another. It's the womb, the placenta. The thymus and the womb are connected for the cycle of life. When you see the double crown, the red crown is the womb and the placenta. The white crown is the thymus, who has its influence on the womb. That's the symbol of one of the glands.
In the early 1900s, alchemist Schwaller de Lubitz presented a work called The Temple of Man. It demonstrated that the architects of the Luxor temple used sacred geometry, which reflected the exact proportions of the human body. As in all Egyptian temples, the most sacred space was located at the back of the temple, the Holy of Holies, which corresponded to the pineal gland. When activated, the pineal gland is said to stimulate the evolution of higher states of consciousness. If the temples were metaphors of the human body, the pineal gland corresponded with the Holy of Holies. At the entrance to the most sacred part of the temple stand tall pillars representing the masculine and the feminine, papyrus and the blue lotus. The papyrus and the lotus reflect the balance between the feminine and the masculine principles and are shown together throughout ancient Egyptian art.
The blue lotus is a symbol of life, and this plant, blossom, flower, it grows in the water like water lilies. It's where the ancient Commissions believe that life starts in water and in that lotus form.
We have seen there are always multiple layers of meaning embedded in ancient Egyptian symbols. Is there another reason why the blue lotus was so important in Egyptian ceremonies?
Altering of consciousness has been done by a variety of different methods and techniques, most commonly in shamanistic cultures. Still to this day, it's done by using hallucinogenic plants, which, as it were, switch the receiver wavelength of the brain and allow us to tune in to other realities. Of course, there are a range of non-drug techniques, rhythmic dancing, certain kinds of music, certain kinds of spaces have an effect on human consciousness. But there's a great deal of evidence that they made use of a potion involving the blue lotus, and the mandrake root, possibly also the opium poppy as well, to enter a visionary state, and in that visionary state to explore, navigate, and learn about the realm that lies beyond death. And they had very concrete and specific ideas about this, which are expressed in the ancient Egyptian books of the dead, going right back to the pyramid texts. This was not a work of imagination on the part of the priests. This was a work of documentation, of their out-of-body exploration of realms that lie beyond the merely physical.
Is it possible for us to learn to access other realms today? Can we expand our capacity to perceive? Do we need new ways to describe these phenomena?
If I come today and say, I saw you in my dream, you're going to ask me, what did you see? Then I say the dream. Now, did I show you? The verb see is not there, because I did see you in my dream, but not with my eyes, because I was asleep. So how did that happen? It must be a sense put all this vision to me without my eyes. But I still, when I speak, limit vocabularities to say, I saw you in my dream. No, I didn't see you. But there's no other way to say it.
Could the ancients have mastered innate human abilities that we have forgotten?
You can't tell if that bird on the tree is happy or frightened from a cat. Yeah? You can't tell that the donkey is annoyed or happy by the vibration, the sound. And that's what we want us to notice, the sound. It's not the word you said, it's how being said. You can tell if this vibration, the truth or not truth. It's natural. Healthy people, they use all the senses, the full capacity of senses.
The five senses, as we know them today, were symbolized by the scarab.
And when you see the scarab, you are looking at a human skull, divided in three sides, three sections. The front head, symbolized by ancient people as seven openers, 2, 4, 6, 7. That is the front head. And these are the receivers. You see with, you hear with, you taste with, you know, everything. On the left side is the consciousness side, and that is the daily deeds digested every moment you look at things. But the other side is the subconscious side, something you are unable to explain what's going on.
It seems clear that the ancients knew about the subconscious mind. They had the power to reach beyond the senses, something we began to be aware of with the writings of Freud and the advent of psychology in the early 1900s.
Don't compare people of today like the people of the ancient days. The people of ancient days were healthy. They able to use the senses. We looking at things as a crippled people. We only have 5 senses. We're supposed to have 360 senses. 360, and only 5 is recognized. We got the glands of the sense, but we didn't use it. And any muscles you don't use, it shrinks, obviously.
How can we begin to imagine that the ancients had the capacity of 360 senses? Perhaps a metaphor for the full spectrum senses could be a sphere. Is it possible for us to move beyond our 5 senses today?
Our 5 familiar senses have been evolved by evolution to connect us to the physical and material realm. but we have, I like to think of it as a secret doorway inside our own minds, which can be opened in altered states of consciousness, through which we may project our consciousness into other realms and dimensions, and those then become accessible to us.
Could it be that the ancient Egyptians were accessing supernatural realms through heightened perceptions that came from full spectrum senses?
I've come to the conclusion that it's really impossible to understand ancient Egyptian civilization and ancient Egyptian spirituality and religion until you get to grips with the fact that the priests of that religion were deliberately and in a targeted way cultivating altered states of consciousness in order to access the supernatural realm. They know what shamans all over the world still know today, that in the alert, problem-solving state of consciousness that is particularly valued by Western industrial society, you are not going to have supernatural or spiritual experiences of any kind. It doesn't mean that the supernatural and spirit realms are not there, because they are. They are all around us all the time. But our senses cannot tune into them.
It seems that the ancients must have been tuned into something that allowed them to build sacred structures using monumental architecture. Today, we consider ourselves to be highly educated. Yet, engineers are at a loss when they try to build even a small pyramid. Has our system of education diverted us from what was common knowledge in ancient times?
There were no schools and universities like what we have today. We've been influenced by this system of teaching. Today we think it's a relative life, that no education, they haven't been to school, and how can they build a pyramid? They don't know figures, how can they do this? But we don't know that the senses we have make the impossible possible. The impossible to us, which based on ignorance, make it possible. Because knowing is a very great power, just to know.
The most important ceremony for teaching the populace how to live well was the weighing of the heart. It reveals what the ancients believed happened in the moments after death.
Initially, in the ceremony of the weighing of the hearts, the deceased would meet Anubis, who would say, "You're dead. Let's have your heart. We're going to weigh it against the feather of truth." If your heart was heavy, because you had done something immoral, you weren't allowed to go to the other side. So the populace learned that they had to be light of heart in order to live well.
As ancient Egypt slipped into patriarchal ways of being and thinking, the old spiritual ideology became codified, and organized religion became dominated by the Amun priesthood.
The Amun priesthood had a lot of power, and they were in a position to have people pay for their salvation. It used to be that your heart was weighed against a feather of truth, but in later pictures of the ceremony of the weighing of the heart, you'll see Horus holding onto the scale, and you could pay the priesthood for Shakti dolls, and the more of them you had, the more likelihood you could buy the lightness of heart instead of being light of heart. Well, this is a fundamental change in terms of how to live well. And I think that we still are living in that way.